Good evening all, and welcome back to our channel. What if I told you that in the quiet mountains of Vermont, people don't just go missing, they vanish into thin air, leaving behind belongings, witnesses, and questions that have never been answered? Today, we're diving into 5 of the most disturbing true horror stories from Vermont's infamous Bennington Triangle, where reality itself seems to break down. Before we begin, if you're fascinated by true unsolved mysteries and unexplained disappearances, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into the darkest corners of American history. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end of this video, because the final story involves a discovery so disturbing it made a veteran detective retire early and question everything he thought he knew about death. Let's get started. December 1st, 1946. The date would become seared into the consciousness of Bennington, Vermont, like a brand on flesh. Paula Jean Welden, 18 years old, a sophomore at Bennington College, walked out of her dormitory at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She wore a red parka, blue jeans, and sneakers. She told her roommate she was going for a walk on the long trail. She never came back. What makes Paula's disappearance so deeply disturbing isn't just that she vanished without a trace. It's the witnesses. The people who saw her, the people who watched her walk toward something unknown, something waiting in those mountains that swallowed her whole. Louis Knapp, an elderly man who knew the trails well, saw Paula at approximately 4:15 that afternoon. He was returning from his own hike when he spotted her walking briskly up the trail, her red jacket bright against the gray Vermont winter. He nodded to her. She nodded back. He said she seemed determined, purposeful. Not afraid. Not lost, just a young woman on a walk. That was the first sighting. 10 minutes later, a middle-aged couple from Massachusetts encountered Paula on the trail. They were coming down as she was going up. They specifically remembered her red jacket, how it stood out against the darkening woods. They said she smiled at them politely as they passed. They noticed nothing unusual about her demeanor. She wasn't running. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She was simply hiking, enjoying the crisp December air. That was the second sighting. The third sighting is where things become impossibly strange. A contractor named Ernest Whitman was working on a stone wall near the trail when he saw Paula walking along the road that connected to the long trail. She was about 100 yards ahead of him. He watched her reach a bend in the trail, saw her red jacket disappear around the corner. He bent down to lift another stone for the wall. When he looked up again, perhaps 15 seconds later, the trail was empty. Ernest Whitman would later tell investigators that he had a clear view of the trail for at least a quarter mile beyond that bend. There was nowhere for Paula to have gone, no side paths, no buildings, no thick brush she could have plunged into. The trail simply stretched ahead, and she should have been visible walking along it, but she wasn't there. He assumed she must have moved very quickly, though he couldn't understand how. He thought nothing more of it until the next day when the first search parties began forming. The search for Paula Jean Welden became one of the most extensive in Vermont's history. More than 1,000 people combed the mountains. The FBI was called in. Bloodhounds tracked her scent along the long trail for several miles before losing it completely at a crossroads. The dogs circled, confused, unable to pick up any trace of her beyond that single point. It was as if Paula had simply ceased to exist at that spot. Her father, a man named William Welden, was an industrial engineer from Connecticut. He arrived in Bennington consumed with the kind of grief that turns to obsession. He offered rewards. He hired private investigators. He returned to those mountains again and again, certain that his daughter was out there, that someone knew something, that the answer was buried somewhere in that endless green wilderness. But the wilderness kept its secrets. Theories emerged, as they always do when someone vanishes without explanation. Some said Paula had run away with a secret boyfriend, though her friends insisted she had no such relationship. Others suggested she'd met with foul play, that someone had been waiting for her on that trail. But there was no evidence of violence, no blood, no signs of struggle, no body. The most disturbing theory, whispered in diners and general stores throughout Bennington, was that Paula had simply been taken. Taken by what? No one could say. The old-timers spoke of the mountains having hunger, of ancient things that dwelled in the deep woods. The Abenaki people, who had lived in these lands long before the colonists arrived, had their own stories about certain places where people shouldn't walk alone, where the boundary between this world and something else grew thin. Paula's disappearance occurred in an area that would later become known as the Bennington Triangle, a region in southwestern Vermont where multiple people vanished under impossible circumstances. But in 1946, Paula was the first, the one who opened the door, perhaps, to whatever darkness lurked in those mountains. What torments the mind about Paula's case is the sheer impossibility of it. 3 separate witnesses saw her walking up that trail. The contractor watched her round a bend, and then she was simply gone. Vanished, erased. As if the mountain had opened up and swallowed her, the search continued for weeks, then months. Winter came hard that year, burying the mountains under feet of snow. William Welden refused to give up. He trudged through snowdrifts, calling his daughter's name until his voice went hoarse. Other searchers began to report strange experiences in the woods, feelings of being watched. Sudden, overwhelming dread that would wash over them for no reason. Compasses that spun uselessly. The sense that the forest itself was alive and hostile. One searcher, a local man named Harold, told a reporter that he'd been looking for Paula near the area where she was last seen when he heard someone calling his name. He turned, expecting to see another member of the search party, but the woods were empty. The voice called again, definitely his name, definitely coming from deeper in the forest. Something about the voice made him turn around and walk quickly back to the main trail. He refused to explain what had frightened him so badly. He refused to go back. By spring of 1947, the official search had been called off. Paula Jean Welden was declared missing, presumed dead, though no death certificate would be issued for years. Her father continued his private search for the rest of his life. He died in 1971, never knowing what happened to his daughter. The truly horrifying aspect of Paula's disappearance is what it represents. The fragility of existence, the notion that you can be walking on a well-marked trail in the middle of the afternoon, visible to multiple witnesses, and then simply cease to be. No goodbye, no explanation, just a red jacket disappearing around a bend, and then nothing, forever nothing. Those who study the case, even decades later, find themselves pulled into its mystery. They pore over the witness statements, trying to find some missed detail, some clue everyone overlooked. But there's nothing there. Paula walked into the woods, and the woods kept her. Some nights, hikers on the long trail report seeing a flash of red through the trees. A young woman in an old-fashioned red jacket, walking purposefully along a path that runs parallel to the main trail. When they call out or try to approach, she's gone. Just a trick of the light, they tell themselves. Just the mind playing games in the wilderness. But the sightings persist, year after year, decade after decade. A girl in red, forever walking toward something, forever disappearing around that same bend in the trail. The last person to see Paula alive, that contractor, Ernest Whitman, gave one final interview before his death in 1983. He was asked if he remembered that day, December 1st, 1946. He said he remembered it every day. He was asked if he had any theories about what happened to Paula Welden. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that chills the blood of anyone who reads the interview transcript. He said that when he'd seen Paula around that bend, just before she disappeared, he'd had the strangest feeling that she wasn't alone. That there was something walking beside her, or just ahead of her, something he couldn't see but could somehow sense. He said the air had felt wrong that afternoon, too still, too quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. He said he'd spent 37 years wishing he'd called out to her, wishing he'd told her to come back, that something felt wrong, that she shouldn't go any further. But he hadn't. He'd lifted another stone for his wall and looked away for 15 seconds. 15 seconds. That's all it took for Paula Jean Welden to step out of our world and into whatever darkness waited for her in those mountains. 15 seconds for an 18-year-old girl to become a ghost story, a mystery, a warning. The long trail is still there. People hike it every day, Most know nothing about Paula Welden, but some do. Some walk that trail and think about the girl in the red jacket. They wonder if she's still out there somewhere, still walking, still trying to find her way home. They wonder what she saw in those final moments. What made her disappear so completely that not even her bones were ever found. And late at night, when the wind moves through the Vermont mountains, there are those who swear they can hear it. A young woman's voice calling out from the deep woods, asking for help, asking for someone to find her. But no one ever does. The mountains keep their secrets, and Paula Jean Welden is one of them. The bus rolls through the Vermont darkness, its headlights cutting weak tunnels through the December night. Inside, 14 passengers sit in various states of drowsiness, lulled by the engine's rhythm and the gentle rocking as the vehicle navigates the winding mountain roads. It's December 1st, 1949. In a few hours, this ordinary evening commute will become something that defies explanation, something that will haunt every person on this bus for the rest of their lives. James Tedford sits in his seat near the back. He's 68 years old, a veteran who's been visiting relatives in St. Albans. Now he's heading home to the soldier's home in Bennington. He wears a dark coat and carries a small bag with his belongings. His bus ticket is tucked safely in his jacket pocket. Everything about this journey is routine. Everything is normal. The bus driver checks his mirror occasionally, catching glimpses of his passengers. Some read by the dim overhead lights, others sleep with their heads against the windows. Tedford is awake, staring out at the darkness rolling past. The bus makes its scheduled stops. People get on. People get off. The vehicle grows emptier as it gets closer to Bennington. At the second-to-last stop, several passengers disembark. The driver counts heads as he always does. 14 passengers remain. He knows this. He will swear to this detail under questioning again and again until the day he dies. 14 passengers, including James Tedford in his seat near the back. The bus pulls away from the stop. The next stop is Bennington, less than 20 minutes away now. The driver's eyes return to the dark road ahead. The passengers settle into their seats for the final stretch. Some are locals coming home from work. Others are travelers passing through. All of them are about to become witnesses to the impossible. Later, they will try to remember if they heard anything. A cry, a struggle, the sound of the back door opening. But there is nothing to remember. The bus is quiet except for the engine's drone and the occasional rustle of a newspaper. The darkness presses against the windows. The road unspools beneath the wheels. 20 minutes can feel like no time at all. The bus pulls into Bennington. The driver shifts into park and turns to face his passengers, ready to announce the stop. His eyes sweep the interior of the bus, and his mouth goes dry. 13 passengers. He counts again. And again. 13. James Tedford's seat is empty. But not just empty. His belongings are still there. His timetable sits open on the seat where he left it, as if he'd just set it down for a moment. His bag rests on the floor by his feet, or where his feet should be, where his feet were. The driver stands, his legs unsteady. He walks down the aisle, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes are telling him. The other passengers begin to stir, noticing his agitation. They see the empty seat. They see the abandoned belongings. Confusion spreads through the bus like cold water. "Did anyone see the man who was sitting here?" the driver asks. His voice cracks slightly. "Did anyone see him get off?" The passengers look at each other. They shake their heads. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that most of them remember seeing Tedford earlier in the journey. They remember an older man in a dark coat sitting in that seat. They remember him being there. But none of them can remember the moment he stopped being there. The police are called. They arrive quickly and begin their investigation. The bus is searched thoroughly, every inch of it. The luggage compartment, under the seats, even the roof. James Tedford is not on the bus. He is not hiding. He is not collapsed in some corner. He is simply not there. But his things remain, his timetable, his bag, everything except the man himself. The passengers are questioned, one by one. Their stories are maddeningly consistent. Most remember seeing Tedford on the bus earlier in the journey. Several specifically recall seeing him after the second-to-last stop. He was there, they're certain, but none of them saw him leave. None of them remember the moment of his absence beginning. One passenger, a woman named Margaret, says something during her interview that makes the investigating officer go pale. She says that at some point during the last leg of the journey, she'd looked back at the seats behind her. She'd seen Tedford in his seat, but something about the image had felt wrong. She couldn't explain it then, and she can't explain it now, but she remembers thinking that he looked somehow faded, less solid than he should be. She'd blinked and dismissed the thought as a trick of the dim light. When she'd looked back a second time, she couldn't remember exactly when. The seat had been empty. Another passenger, a businessman named Robert, tells a similar story. He'd been dozing and had woken briefly during the last stretch. He'd glanced around the bus in that disoriented way people do when they're half asleep. He remembers seeing Tedford's seat and having the odd impression that someone was there but also not there. Like looking at a photograph that's been partially erased. He closed his eyes again, thinking he was still dreaming. The police search the route. They check every inch of road between the last stop and Bennington, looking for any sign that Tedford might have jumped or fallen from the bus. But the bus has no emergency exit. The back door can only be opened from the outside. The windows are too small for a man to fit through, and besides, the bus was moving. Even if Tedford had somehow managed to escape through a window, the impact would have killed him or at least left him severely injured on the roadside. They find nothing. No body, no blood, no torn clothing, no evidence that James Tedford ever left that bus by any normal means. The investigation expands. Police interview Tedford's relatives in St. Albans. They confirm he'd visited them and left on the scheduled bus. They'd waved goodbye to him. He'd seemed perfectly normal. Not distressed, not suicidal, just an old veteran heading home. The soldier's home in Bennington is contacted. Tedford's room is searched. His belongings are there, untouched. His bed is made. Everything waits for a man who will never return. Days pass, then weeks, then months. James Tedford remains missing. The case makes headlines across Vermont and beyond. The vanishing man, the ghost passenger, the man who wasn't there. Newspapers run wild with theories. Some suggest elaborate hoaxes. Others propose that Tedford had Confederates who somehow spirited him away for unknown reasons. But none of these theories can account for the simple, terrifying facts. A man was on a bus. Multiple witnesses saw him. The bus was moving between stops. The man vanished. His belongings remained. No one saw or heard anything unusual. Psychologists are consulted. Could this be mass hysteria? Could all the passengers have somehow imagined Tedford's presence? But the driver's count is clear. 14 passengers after the second-to-last stop. 13 passengers in Bennington. Someone was there. Someone who left behind a timetable and a bag but took nothing else, including his physical body. The case attracts attention from beyond the realm of conventional investigation. Paranormal researchers descend on Bennington, adding Tedford's disappearance to the growing list of vanishings in the area. They speak of thin places, locations where the fabric between worlds grows permeable. They suggest Tedford didn't leave the bus by normal means because normal means don't apply. He slipped through a crack in reality, they say. He fell out of the world. The rational mind recoils from such explanations. But what rational explanation exists? How does a man vanish from a moving bus, leaving behind his possessions but taking his body? How do 13 other people fail to notice this vanishing until the moment it's complete? One of the passengers, a young man named Thomas, develops insomnia after the incident. He tells his wife that he lies awake at night trying to remember that bus ride. He knows Tedford was there. He can almost picture him in that seat. But when he tries to focus on the memory, it slips away like water through his fingers. The harder he tries to remember seeing Tedford on that last stretch of road, the less certain he becomes. It's as if the memory itself is disappearing, fading like an old photograph left in the sun. The bus driver quits his job 3 months later. He never drives again. When asked why, he says he can't trust his own perceptions anymore. How can he be responsible for passengers when passengers can simply stop existing? How can he do his job when reality itself has proven unreliable? Years pass. James Tedford is never found. No body, no closure, no explanation. His family holds no funeral because how do you bury a man who might not be dead? How do you mourn someone who didn't die but simply ceased to exist? The bus route continues operating. Other drivers take over. Other passengers make the journey from St. Albans to Bennington. Most know nothing about James Tedford, but some do. Some board that bus and find themselves counting the passengers, checking the seats, making sure everyone who starts the journey finishes it. And sometimes, late at night, on that final stretch of road between the second-to-last stop and Bennington, passengers report a strange feeling. A chill that has nothing to do with the Vermont winter. A sense that the bus is carrying one more passenger than they can account for. They count heads and the numbers add up, but something feels wrong. Something feels like it's there, but not there. The drivers who've worked this route long enough know the feeling. They see it in their mirrors. An empty seat that feels occupied. A space in the bus that seems denser than it should be, as if the air itself is holding the shape of someone who used to be. Some nights, they say, you can see a timetable on one of the rear seats, left open as if someone had just been reading it. But when you walk back to check, there's nothing there. Just an empty seat in a bus full of people trying not to think about the man who vanished between stops. James Tedford got on a bus on December 1st, 1949. He never got off. Not in Bennington, not anywhere. He simply stopped existing somewhere along that dark Vermont road, leaving behind only his belongings and a question that will never be answered. Where did he go? The road knows, the darkness knows, but they're not telling. And somewhere, in whatever space James Tedford now occupies, perhaps he knows too. Perhaps he's still sitting in that seat, still watching the darkness roll past, still waiting for a stop that will never come. The bus still runs. The darkness still presses against the windows. And if you take that route late at night, if you find yourself on that final stretch between stops, count the passengers carefully. I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened to my boy. I need you to know that I was right there. I could reach out and touch the truck. I could see where Buddy was sitting. I was no more than 20 feet away. 20 feet. And he was gone. They all said I shouldn't have left him. Said I was negligent. Said a mother doesn't leave her special needs child alone, not even for a minute. But they don't understand. They weren't there. They don't know how normal it seemed, how safe. It was the Bennington dump. It was Sunday afternoon, October 12, 1950. The sun was shining. There were other people around. It was normal. Everything was so goddamn normal. Buddy was 8 years old. He had what they called difficulties. Slow to learn, they said. Simple, some of the less kind folks whispered. But he was my boy, and he was perfect to me. He had his father's eyes, and his smile could light up a room, even when he didn't fully understand why he was smiling. He loved trucks, loved sitting in our old pickup, pretending to drive. He'd make engine noises and turn the wheel and laugh, that beautiful laugh of his. That Sunday, we needed to make a run to the dump. My husband was working. It was just me and Buddy. I loaded up the trash in the truck bed, and Buddy climbed into the cab, happy as could be. He loved going for rides, loved watching the world go by through the window. I started the engine, and we headed out. The dump was busy that afternoon, typical for a Sunday. Folks cleaning out their garages, getting rid of broken furniture, hauling away junk. I pulled up near the edge where people were throwing their stuff into the pit. The truck bed was full and I needed to empty it. I looked at Buddy. He was playing with the steering wheel, making his engine noises, completely content. "Stay in the truck, buddy," I told him. "Mama's just gonna be a minute. You stay right here, okay?" He nodded at me, smiled, kept making his engine noises. I got out and walked around to the back of the truck. I could see the cab from where I was standing. I could see Buddy's head through the rear window. I started pulling bags and boxes from the truck bed, tossing them into the dump. Other folks were around me, doing the same. The sound of trash hitting the pile, the smell of rot and waste. The autumn sun warm on my face. I worked quickly, grabbed a heavy box and heaved it over the edge, heard it crash on the pile below, reached for another bag. The whole time, I was aware of the truck, aware of Buddy in the cab. I'd glance up every few seconds, see his shadow through the window. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. I tossed the last bag and wiped my hands on my dress. The whole thing had taken maybe 3 minutes, maybe 4. I walked back around to the driver's side, already thinking about what we'd have for supper, about whether we needed to stop at the store on the way home. I opened the door and looked into the cab. Empty. For a second, my brain couldn't process it. The seat where Buddy had been sitting was empty. The steering wheel he'd been playing with was still. The silence was absolute. "Buddy?" I called. My voice sounded strange, too high, too tight. I looked in the back of the cab. Not there. I walked around the truck, thinking maybe he'd climbed out and was hiding, playing a game. "Buddy? Baby, where are you?" Nothing. The dump suddenly seemed enormous. The pit yawned before me, full of garbage and broken things. The trees pressed close on all sides. "Buddy!" I screamed now. "Buddy, answer Mama!" Other people turned to look at me, saw the panic on my face. "My boy," I said, my voice breaking. "My boy was in the truck. He's 8. He's got brown hair. He's wearing a blue shirt. Has anyone seen him?" They shook their heads, started calling out too. "Kid! Hey, kid!" Their voices echoed through the dump. Someone ran to call the police. Others began searching, combing through the garbage, looking in and under vehicles. I stood by the truck, frozen, my mind screaming that this couldn't be happening. He was right here. He was right here 3 minutes ago. I could see the indentation in the seat where he'd been sitting. I could still smell him, that little boy smell of dirt and soap and innocence. The police arrived quickly. Sheriff Gagne took my statement. I could see in his eyes that he thought I was lying, that I'd left Buddy somewhere else and forgotten. But I hadn't. God help me, I hadn't. They brought in bloodhounds, tracking dogs trained to find missing people. The dogs sniffed Buddy's blanket from the truck, the one he'd been holding. They caught the scent immediately and took off, pulling hard on their leads. I'll never forget what happened next. It's burned into my mind like a brand. The dogs tracked Buddy's scent from the truck straight toward the tree line. Their handlers followed, confident, telling us they'd find him quickly. The dogs were good dogs. They knew their job. They pulled toward the woods, noses to the ground, following something invisible but real. They reached the edge of the dump where the forest began. There was an old access road there, rarely used, overgrown but still passable. The dogs followed the scent to that road and then they stopped. Just stopped. They circled, whining, confused. They'd lost the scent. But that's not the part that made my blood run cold. The part that made my blood run cold was what the handlers said. The scent didn't fade. It didn't gradually disappear the way a scent does when someone's been walking and the trail grows old. The scent ended, abruptly, as if Buddy had simply ceased to exist at that exact spot on the road. The handlers brought the dogs back, tried again, same result. The scent led from the truck to the road, and then it was gone, completely, as if Buddy had evaporated into the air. They searched for days, weeks, dragged the dump, combed every inch of forest for miles around, checked abandoned buildings, questioned every person who'd been at the dump that day. Nothing, not a trace, not a scrap of clothing, not a footprint, nothing. The theories started then. People said I'd killed him and disposed of the body. Said I was a bad mother who'd hurt her simple child and made up a story. The looks I got in town, the whispers that followed me everywhere. I wanted to die, would have died, except I needed to find my boy. But there were other theories, quieter ones, whispered by old-timers who knew the history of these mountains. They talked about the other disappearances, Paula Welden 2 years before, others. They talked about something in the woods, something that took people, especially near Glastonbury Mountain, and the dump wasn't far from there. I didn't want to believe it, still don't, but I can't explain what happened. I was 20 feet away. Buddy was in the truck. He couldn't have climbed out without me seeing. He was a little boy with difficulties. He couldn't have run far. And even if he had, the dogs would have tracked him. But the dogs lost his scent in the middle of a road, as if something had picked him up, lifted him right off the ground, carried him away through the air. I think about that moment constantly. Those 3 or 4 minutes when I was unloading the truck. What happened in that cab? Did Buddy see something? Did something call to him? Did he get scared? Did he cry for me? Or was it quick, painless? Did something just reach through from somewhere else and take him before he even knew what was happening? I dream about it. In my dreams, I walk around the truck and Buddy's there, safe, smiling, making his engine noises. Then I wake up and the bed next to me is empty, and I remember all over again that my boy is gone. They declared him dead eventually. No body, no evidence, just declared dead because what else could they do? But I know in my heart he didn't just die. Something took him. Something that lives in these mountains. Something that's been taking people for longer than anyone wants to admit. I still live in Bennington. Can't leave. What if he comes back? What if he finds his way home and I'm not here? I keep his room exactly the way it was. His toys, his bed, everything waiting for a little boy who's been gone for years now. Sometimes at night, I drive past that dump. It's closed now, overgrown. But I park there and I sit in the truck and I try to understand. I try to piece together what happened in those 3 minutes. And sometimes, I swear to God, I hear it, faint, like it's coming from very far away. The sound of a little boy making engine noises. Vroom, vroom, happy, content. Like he's still playing in the truck, waiting for his mama to finish up so they can drive home together. But when I get out and look, there's nothing there. Just trees and darkness and the weight of questions that will never be answered. Where should you go, buddy? What took you? Are you scared? Are you cold? Do you remember me? The worst part, the part that keeps me awake at night, is not knowing. If he died, I could grieve. I could bury him. I could visit a grave and talk to him. But this endless uncertainty, this hell of wondering if he's somewhere out there, lost, looking for me, it's been years now. Buddy would be grown if he's still alive. But he's not alive. I know that. Mothers know these things. He's gone. Something took him from that truck in broad daylight with dozens of people nearby. Something that the dogs couldn't track. Something that left no trace. The police say he probably wandered off and fell into a ravine or got taken by a drifter. They have to say that. Have to believe there's a rational explanation. But I was there. I saw what the dogs did. I saw how the scent just ended in the middle of that road. You can't tell me that's natural. Something is in these woods, something that takes people, children, adults. It doesn't matter. When it wants you, it takes you, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. I'm telling you this because you need to know. Everyone who lives here needs to know. This isn't just a missing persons case. This isn't just a tragedy. This is a warning. Don't leave your children alone. Not for a minute. Not even when it seems safe. Because safe doesn't mean anything in these mountains. The Bennington Triangle, they call it now. The place where people disappear. My boy was the youngest, 8 years old, special needs, innocent. What could he have possibly done to deserve whatever happened to him? Nothing. He did nothing wrong. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the sights of something that doesn't care about innocence or love, or a mother's heart breaking into pieces so small they can never be put back together. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for answers anymore. I know I'll never get them. I'm just telling you what happened so you understand. So you keep your children close. So you remember that there are things in this world that we don't understand, things that live in the spaces between what we know and what we can't accept. My boy got into my truck that Sunday morning. He never got out, not on his own. Something took him. And somewhere in these mountains, somewhere beyond where the dogs could track, somewhere between this world and whatever lies beyond it, Buddy is still gone. And I'm still here waiting, listening for the sound of a little boy's laughter that I'll never hear again except in dreams. That's what the Bennington Triangle took from me. That's what these mountains stole. My boy, my buddy, my everything. Remember his name, Paul Jepson, 8 years old, last seen October 12, 1950, at the Bennington dump. Vanished without a trace while his mother was 20 feet away. Remember him, because if you forget, if we all forget, then they really did take everything, and I can't let that happen. I can't. Part 1. The Legend Goldbrook Bridge, that's its official name. Built in 1844, it's one of Vermont's oldest covered bridges, spanning Goldbrook and Stowe. The townspeople cross it every day. Cars drive through its wooden tunnel without a second thought, but late at night, when the moon is high and the shadows are deep, it has another name, Emily's Bridge, and Emily is still there. The story goes like this. A young woman named Emily fell in love. Deeply, desperately, the way young people do when they don't yet know that love can destroy you. Her family disapproved. In some versions of the story, the boy was poor. In others, he was from the wrong family. The details change depending on who's telling it, but the core remains the same. Emily and her lover planned to elope. They would meet at the covered bridge at midnight. He would bring a carriage. They would ride away together and never look back. Emily arrived first. She waited in the darkness of the bridge, listening for the sound of horses' hooves, for the creak of carriage wheels. She waited and waited. He never came. In some versions, he abandoned her, changed his mind, ran away. In others, he was killed on his way to meet her, thrown from his horse, murdered by her family. Dead before he could keep his promise. Either way, Emily waited alone in that bridge, her hopes slowly curdling into despair. And then she died. Some say she hanged herself from the rafters, her body swaying in the darkness until dawn. Others say she drove a carriage off the bridge in her grief, plunging into the creek below. Some even say she died of a broken heart right there on the bridge, that her body was found the next morning, still waiting, still hoping. However she died, Emily never left. Part 2. The Witnesses. I didn't believe in ghosts. I want to make that clear from the start. I'm an engineer. I deal in facts, in things that can be measured and proven. But what happened to me on that bridge, I can't explain it. I've tried. God knows I've tried. This is Marcus Chen speaking. He's 34, calm, methodical. He moved to Vermont for work in 2018. He'd heard the stories about Emily's Bridge, of course. Everyone had, but stories were just stories. It was around 11 at night. I was driving home from a friend's house in Stowe. The GPS took me through the back roads, and I ended up on the route that crosses Goldbrook Bridge. I remember thinking it was pretty, in an old-timey way. The headlights lit up the entrance and I drove in. The second I crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. I'm not exaggerating. It was a warm July night, maybe 75 degrees. Inside that bridge, my breath fogged. I could see it in the headlights. I thought maybe it was some weird microclimate thing. Cold air from the creek below. Then something hit my car. A bang, right on the driver's side door, like someone had slammed their fist against it. I jumped so hard I nearly swerved. I looked out the window, but there was nothing there, just the wooden walls of the bridge rushing past. Another impact, the passenger door this time, then the roof. Bang, 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 bang. Like someone was running alongside the car, pounding on it. I floored the accelerator. The car shot forward and I burst out of the bridge into the night air. I pulled over immediately, got out to check for damage. The entire driver's side of my car was covered in scratches. Long, deep gouges in the paint. 4 parallel lines, over and over, like fingernails, like someone had dragged their nails across the door while I was driving. But here's the thing, those scratches, they were fresh. The metal underneath was bright, newly exposed. They hadn't been there when I drove into the bridge. I know because I'd just washed my car that afternoon. I looked back at the bridge. It sat there in the darkness, just a regular covered bridge, but I could feel it, something watching me from inside, something angry. I took photos of the scratches, showed them to a body shop the next day. The guy looked at them and said they were consistent with fingernail scratches. But the depth, he said, whoever made them would have had to be pressing incredibly hard. Hard enough to break their nails, hard enough to shred their fingertips. I never drove across that bridge again. I don't care if it adds 20 minutes to my route. I'm not going back there. Part 3, The Investigation. In October 2015, a group of paranormal investigators spent the night at Emily's Bridge. They brought equipment, EMF meters, digital recorders, infrared cameras. They wanted proof. They got it. Lead investigator Sarah Blackwood reviewed the footage later. She's done this work for 15 years. She's seen a lot of hoaxes, a lot of tricks people play. She's also seen things that made her question everything she thought she knew about reality. The footage from that night, she says, is the most disturbing thing we've ever captured. They'd set up a camera facing the interior of the bridge. Nothing happened for the first 3 hours. Then, at approximately 2017 a.m., the temperature gauge on their equipment dropped 30 degrees in less than a minute. On the infrared camera, something appeared in the center of the bridge. It started as a cold spot, Sarah explains. That's normal in paranormal investigations. But this cold spot, it started taking shape. You could see it forming. First, just a vague human outline, then details. A woman in a long dress. Her hair was loose, hanging down. She was facing away from the camera. We all saw it at the same time. My partner, Tom, he started asking questions. Emily, is that you? Can you hear us? Standard protocol. The figure turned around. I've seen the footage maybe 100 times now. I've shown it to experts, enhanced it, analyzed every pixel, and I still can't explain what we captured. Her face, it wasn't right. The proportions were off. The mouth was too wide. The eyes were too large, and they reflected the infrared light like an animal's eyes. She looked human but wrong, like something trying to imitate human features without quite understanding them. She started moving toward the camera, slowly at first, then faster. Her movements were jerky, unnatural. Tom kept trying to communicate with her, but she didn't respond. Just kept coming closer. When she got within about 10 feet of the camera, her mouth opened, wide, impossibly wide, and she screamed. The audio recorder caught it. It's not a human scream, I don't know what it is. It made 3 of our team members vomit when they heard it. One of them had a panic attack so severe we had to call an ambulance. Then she rushed the camera. That's the only way I can describe it. One moment she was 10 feet away. The next moment she was on it. The camera went flying. The footage cuts to static. When we found the camera, it was broken, smashed, like someone had stomped on it repeatedly, but none of us touched it. We all ran. The second that thing rushed the camera, we all ran out of that bridge and didn't stop until we were back at our cars. We left a lot of equipment in there, thousands of dollars worth of gear. None of us were willing to go back for it. We contacted the local police, told them our stuff was in the bridge and we needed someone to retrieve it. The officer who went in found our equipment smashed to pieces, all of it, and arranged in the center of the bridge in a perfect circle. We published some of our findings, but not the footage. I know that sounds crazy. Why investigate if you're not going to share what you find? But that footage, it's dangerous. I know how that sounds, but I mean it literally. Something about seeing that thing, hearing that scream, it does something to people. Everyone on our team had nightmares for months. One member quit paranormal investigation entirely, moved to another state, won't talk about what happened. Whatever Emily was, she's not that anymore. She's something else now, something that wore away at the edges over the decades until only rage remained. Part 4. The pattern. Local historian James Whitmore has compiled reports about Emily's bridge dating back to 1920. His research reveals a disturbing pattern. Every interaction with Emily follows a similar trajectory, he explains. First, the temperature drops. Second, physical manifestations begin. Scratches on vehicles, banging sounds, objects being moved. Third, if the person doesn't leave, Emily appears. And fourth, if they still don't leave, things get violent. Whitmore has documented 47 reports of scratches appearing on vehicles, 23 reports of objects being thrown inside the bridge, 12 reports of people being physically pushed or struck by invisible forces, and 8 reports of people seeing Emily herself. Of those 8, 3 were hospitalized, 2 for physical injuries sustained while fleeing the bridge, 1 for psychological trauma so severe they were institutionalized for 6 weeks. The pattern suggests Emily isn't just a residual haunting, Whitmore says. Residual hauntings are like recordings. The ghost repeats the same actions over and over with no awareness of the present. Emily is aware. She reacts to people. She escalates her behavior based on whether they stay or leave. That suggests an intelligent haunting, a spirit that's conscious, that can think and respond. But Emily's responses are always aggressive, always violent. In over a century of documented encounters, not once has anyone reported a peaceful interaction with her. I believe Emily is waiting for someone, maybe her lover, maybe anyone, but the waiting has driven her mad. Or maybe what's left isn't really Emily at all. Maybe it's just the echo of her rage, given form and consciousness by all the fear and belief people have poured into this place over the years. Either way, Emily's bridge is dangerous. I don't say that lightly. I've investigated dozens of supposedly haunted locations in Vermont. Most are just old buildings with creaky floorboards. But that bridge, something is there. Something that hurts people. And it's getting worse. The incidents are becoming more frequent, more violent. In the past 5 years alone, we've had more reports than in the previous 20 combined. It's like whatever Emily is, she's growing stronger. Part 5. The warning. There are signs posted near the bridge now, not official ones. The town won't acknowledge the problem, but locals have put them up anyway, hand-painted. Simple. Do not stop on this bridge. Cross quickly. Keep driving no matter what you hear. Most people ignore them. Tourists come specifically to test the legend. They park in the bridge at midnight. They call out for Emily. They dare her to show herself. Most of them drive away with scratches on their cars and stories to tell their friends, but some don't drive away at all. In 2019, a car was found abandoned inside the bridge, engine still running, doors open. The driver was never found. Police searched the area extensively. Nothing. The driver had simply vanished, leaving behind their vehicle and all their belongings. In 2021, a couple parked on the bridge to take photos. The man stepped outside the car and his girlfriend heard him scream. She looked up and he was gone, just gone. She called 911 hysterical. When police arrived, they found gouges in the wooden bridge floor, deep gouges, like something had been dragged. The marks led to the edge of the bridge and then stopped. The man was found 3 days later wandering along a road 15 miles away. He was barefoot, his clothes were torn. He had no memory of what happened. He couldn't explain the bruises that covered his body or why his fingernails were missing. He was the lucky one. He came back. Part 6. The truth. Maybe Emily was real. Maybe there really was a young woman who died of heartbreak on that bridge in the 1800s. Or maybe Emily is something older, something that was there before the bridge was built. Something that humans named Emily because we need to name things to make them comprehensible. Maybe the covered bridge wasn't built over Gold Brook by accident. Maybe it was built to contain something. To trap it. And maybe that thing has been waiting inside for over a century, wearing the story of Emily like a mask. Because here's what the records show. Disappearances near Goldbrook date back to before the bridge was built. The Abenaki people who lived in this area before colonization had a word for the place. It translates roughly to where the lost ones go. They avoided it. We should have listened. But we built a bridge there anyway. Put a roof over it, made it pretty, gave the thing inside a name and a story, turned it into a legend, a tourist attraction, and now it's too strong to ignore. Emily's Bridge stands today, connecting one side of Gold Brook to the other. People cross it every day. Most make it through fine, but some don't. Some hear the scratching, some feel the cold. Some see her in their rearview mirrors as they race away, standing in the center of the bridge, watching them go. And some people, the ones who stop, the ones who stay, the ones who call out to her, they learn that Emily isn't waiting for her lover anymore. She's just waiting. For anyone, for everyone, for you. The bridge is still there, still open, still used. If you ever find yourself driving through Stowe late at night and your GPS directs you down a dark road toward a covered bridge, don't stop, don't call out, don't look back. Just drive through as fast as you can and pray that your car doesn't break down in the middle. Because Emily is patient and she has forever to wait. Case file, Langer, Frieda. Date of disappearance, October 28, 1950. Date of discovery, May 12, 1951. Statues, unresolved initial report, Detective William Harris. I've worked homicide for 23 years. I've seen bodies in every state of decay imaginable. I've investigated murders, suicides, accidents. I thought I'd seen everything a human body could experience after death. Frieda Langer's case taught me I was wrong. Let me start with the disappearance. October 28, 1950. Frieda was 53 years old, married to Herbert Langer. They were experienced hikers, not novices who wandered off trails and got lost. Frieda knew these mountains. She'd hiked them for years. That afternoon, Frieda and Herbert were hiking near Somerset Reservoir with their cousin, Herbert Elsner. Around 4 o'clock, Frieda slipped and fell into a stream. Nothing serious. She got wet. The day was getting colder, and she didn't want to continue hiking in wet clothes. She made a decision. She would return to their camp alone, change into dry clothes, and wait for Herbert and Herbert to return. It was a simple plan. The camp was less than half a mile away. The trail was clear and well marked. Frieda was an experienced hiker in familiar territory. She never made it to camp. Herbert and Herbert returned an hour later. Frieda wasn't there. Her wet clothes were still in the tent. She'd never arrived. Herbert immediately organized a search. He was a skilled outdoorsman, and he knew something was terribly wrong. By nightfall, dozens of volunteers were combing the woods. By the next morning, we had over 300 searchers. By the third day, it was one of the largest search operations in Vermont history. We found nothing, no body, no clothing, no signs of a struggle, no blood, no tracks leading anywhere unusual. Frieda had simply vanished somewhere on that half-mile stretch between where she fell in the stream and the camp. The search continued for weeks. We used bloodhounds. They lost her scent at a certain point on the trail, the same way the dogs lost the scent in the Jepson case. We brought in helicopters once the technology became available. We had experts examine every inch of that terrain. Nothing. By December, we had to call off the active search. Frieda Langer was declared missing, presumed dead. Herbert refused to accept it. He continued searching on his own throughout the winter and into spring. And then, on May 12, 1951, a team of hikers found her. Discovery Report, Detective William Harris. The body was located near Somerset Reservoir in an area that had been extensively searched during the initial investigation. I want to be absolutely clear about this. That area was searched multiple times by multiple teams. We had people walking grid patterns through there. It's impossible that we missed a body. Yet there she was. I arrived at the scene at approximately 2:30 p.m. The body was lying in a small clearing, partially concealed by underbrush. The hikers who found her said they almost walked past. She was just there, in a spot where she shouldn't have been. The first thing that struck me was the position. Frieda was lying on her back, arms at her sides, legs straight, almost peaceful, not the position you'd expect from someone who'd died of exposure or injury. There was no sign of animal predation, no indication she'd tried to build shelter or signal for help. She was just lying there, as if she'd been placed there. The second thing was her clothing. She was wearing the wet clothes she'd had on when she disappeared, the same clothes she'd planned to change out of at camp. After 6.5 months exposed to the Vermont elements through winter, those clothes should have been rotted. They weren't. They were wet, as if she'd just fallen in the stream. The third thing was the state of the body. I've seen bodies that have been exposed to the elements for 6 months. They're not bodies anymore. They're skeletons with some tissue clinging to the bones. They're scattered by animals. They're decomposed beyond recognition. Frieda's body was decomposed, but not in any way that made sense. The rate of decomposition was accelerated, extreme, as if she'd been dead for years rather than months. But the pattern was wrong. Bodies decompose in a predictable order. Soft tissues go first. Bacteria in the gut cause bloating. Fluids leak. The process is well documented. Frieda's body didn't follow that pattern. Some parts were pristinely preserved. Her hands, for example, looked almost fresh. Other parts were reduced to bone. Her ribcage was completely exposed. Her internal organs were missing entirely, but there was no sign of animal scavenging. They were just gone. The medical examiner, Dr. Samuel Foster, performed the autopsy. I've included his preliminary report in this file. Reading it still makes my hands shake. Medical Examiner's Report, Dr. Samuel Foster. I have performed over 2,000 autopsies in my career. I am experienced in determining cause of death and estimating time since death based on decomposition patterns. I am submitting this report with the acknowledgement that I cannot adequately explain my findings. The body of Frieda Langer presents with inconsistencies that do not align with known forensic science. Time of death. The state of decomposition suggests the body had been deceased for an extended period, possibly years. However, the subject was known to be alive 6.5 months prior to discovery. This discrepancy cannot be explained by environmental factors. Cause of death cannot be determined. The condition of the body makes it impossible to identify injury, disease, or any clear cause of death. There is no evidence of trauma, no fractures, no indication of hypothermia, no signs of cardiac arrest. The subject's internal organs are absent. This absence is not consistent with animal predation or normal decomposition. There are no claw marks, teeth marks, or disruption of the ribcage that would indicate scavengers. The organs appear to have been removed, but there is no mechanism by which this could have occurred naturally. Most disturbing, tissue samples were taken from various parts of the body. Laboratory analysis revealed cell degradation patterns that are inconsistent with standard post-mortem decomposition. The cells appear to have broken down at different rates in different parts of the body simultaneously. This should not be biologically possible. Additionally, chemical analysis of tissue samples revealed trace elements not normally found in human decomposition. I have submitted these findings to a colleague at the state laboratory for further analysis. I am unable to determine cause of death. I am unable to explain the condition of the body. This case requires further investigation by specialists in forensic pathology. Detective's notes, Detective William Harris. Dr. Foster won't talk about this case anymore. I called him last week to ask a follow-up question and he hung up on me. His secretary told me he's been having nightmares about the Langer autopsy. He's requested a leave of absence. I don't blame him. The chemical analysis he mentioned, the state lab couldn't identify the trace elements. They sent samples to a university. The university couldn't identify them either. Whatever those substances were, they're not in any database. They're not compounds that occur naturally in decomposition. So where did they come from? I've interviewed Herbert Langer multiple times. He's broken. His wife vanishes on a half-mile walk to camp. Hundreds of people search for months and find nothing. Then she appears in an area that was thoroughly searched, in a condition that makes no medical sense. He wants answers. I don't have answers. The official cause of death was listed as undetermined. The case was closed. There's nothing more we can do without evidence. But here's what keeps me awake at night. Where was Frieda Langer for 6.5 months? Not in those woods. We searched those woods thoroughly. Multiple times, she wasn't there. Then suddenly she was there, lying peacefully in a clearing, her body in an impossible state of decay. Something moved her, something placed her there. But what? And why? Supplemental notes, Detective William Harris. I've been researching the other disappearances in this area. Paula Welden, James Tedford, Paul Jepson, Carl Herrick, Mitty Rivers. There's a pattern here. People vanish in this region without a trace. Sometimes they're never found. Sometimes they're found in places that were already searched, in conditions that don't make sense. Frieda Langer is the only one whose body was recovered. Everyone else is just gone. But Frieda's discovery raises more questions than it answers. If something took her, why did it bring her back? If she died of natural causes, why was her body in that state? If she was killed, why is there no evidence of how? I requested permission to keep the case open. Request denied. The brass want it closed. They want a clean explanation. She got lost, died of exposure, the body decomposed normally, case closed. But that's not what happened. I know it. Dr. Foster knows it. Anyone who looks at the evidence honestly knows it. Something happened to Frieda Langer during those 6.5 months. Something that accelerated her decomposition. Something that removed her organs without leaving a mark. Something that left trace elements in her tissue that shouldn't exist. And something brought her back. Why? Personal Journal Entry. Detective William Harris, June 3rd, 1951. I went back to the site where Frieda was found. I shouldn't have. The case is closed. But I needed to see it again. The clearing where she was lying is unremarkable. Just trees and underbrush. Nothing special. But standing there, I felt wrong. Like the air was too thick. Like something was watching me. I stayed for an hour looking for anything we might have missed. I found nothing except a growing sense of dread. The longer I stood there, the more convinced I became that I needed to leave. Not wanted to leave, needed to leave. It reminded me of the feeling you get when you're in a house and you realize someone else is there. That prickle on the back of your neck, that certainty that you're not alone. I left. I practically ran back to my car. That night, I dreamed about Frieda. She was lying in the clearing exactly as we found her. But in the dream, her eyes were open, and she was trying to tell me something. Her mouth was moving, but no sound came out. Then something stepped out of the trees behind her. Something tall, something that shouldn't exist. I tried to see it clearly, but my eyes wouldn't focus on it. It leaned down over Frieda's body and touched her face. That's when I woke up, screaming. I'm a detective. I deal in evidence and logic. I don't believe in the supernatural, but I believe something is wrong with this case. Something is wrong with this place. Something is wrong with those mountains. Final note, Detective William Harris, September 1951. I'm retiring early. My wife is relieved. She says I've become obsessed with the Langer case. Maybe I have, but I can't let it go. Frieda Langer was taken by something, kept for 6 months, then returned in a state that defies medical explanation. She's not the first. She won't be the last. Whatever is in those mountains, whatever takes people, it's still there, still waiting. And occasionally, very occasionally, it gives them back. Changed. Impossible. Wrong. I'm leaving Bennington. I can't work here anymore. Every missing person case feels connected to this. Every unsolved disappearance makes me think of Frieda, lying in that clearing where she shouldn't have been. If you're reading this, if you ever work a case in the Bennington Triangle, know this, you won't solve it. Not really. You can write reports and file paperwork and close the case officially, but you'll never know the truth. Because the truth is in those mountains. And the mountains don't give up their secrets. They only give back bodies, sometimes, in conditions that make you question everything you thought you knew about death. ADDDEM, found in Detective Harris's desk after his death in 1979. I never stopped thinking about Frieda Langer. Even after I retired, even after I moved away, the case haunted me until the day I died. I'm writing this knowing no one will believe it. But I need to say it. Frieda Langer didn't die in those woods, not in any way we understand death. Something took her. Something kept her. Something changed her at a fundamental level. And then something brought her back and left her in that clearing for us to find. Why? To show us it could. To show us that our understanding of life and death means nothing in those mountains. To show us that we're not safe. That the rules we think govern reality don't apply there. Frieda Langer's body was a message. I just wish I knew what it said.